My name is Rebecca Geller, and I am on the board for the Northern Virginia Democratic Business Council. I'm also a business owner myself. I am the owner of the Geller Law Group, which is a woman-owned law firm in Northern Virginia that does work with small businesses and families for estate planning and business law and family law. Today I'm delighted to be the moderator to do a Meet the Candidate for Eileen Fillercorn, who is running for Congress in the 10th District. Eileen is a longtime friend of mine. We go to the same synagogue and we met, gosh, it's been almost 20 years, I believe. We met because we were both lawyers serving on the board for our synagogue's board of directors back when we had meetings that were in person and lasted approximately 7 hours. And that's when we got to know each other. And she's been an important person in my family for a long time. To let you all know a bit about kind of who she is as a politician, Eileen was first elected to the House in a seat that the Republican governor had swept by 10 points. So she has run very tough races. She was the first woman speaker of the House of Delegates in Virginia's 400-year history. She became speaker in 2020. I had the honor of being at the swearing in when she became speaker. And one of the most important issues that she became known for was leading the charge to pass some of the most transformative gun violence prevention legislation in the country. And now she is running for Congress. I'm not going to get too much into the issues because we're going to talk about that today. To let you all know about kind of the topics and how this will work. So I'll spend about maybe 15 minutes asking Eileen some questions that we have prepared. And then the last maybe 10 minutes, we'll open it up for Q&A from the group. I do ask everybody to make sure you are on mute unless you all are asking questions. So we'll go ahead and start. Eileen, your story about how you got into politics is really interesting. You did not think that you would be running for office. But I know that there was a life-changing moment that really kind of launched your public service journey. I'll tell the story briefly, but then I'd love for you to kind of tell us a little bit more about, what that was like for you and the impact. In 1996, Eileen was in the parking lot of Springfield Mall, and her kids were really little at the time. She has two kids who are now in their 20s, but they were 2 years old and 6 months old. And Eileen was carjacked and threatened with a gun while with her children with her. That changed her, and that's when she decided to get into office, to run for office, and get involved with politics. And Eileen, I'd love to hear from you about what that experience is like and how that impacted you and how that impacts who you are now as somebody who's running for Congress.
Absolutely, and thank you so much, Rebecca, and appreciate the opportunity to be on and have this conversation. So yeah, just starting there, definitely was harrowing, scary, obviously, just beyond words. And it just led me to start thinking about what I could do, how I can make changes moving forward. But I just remember, at that moment, just being in shock. We turned out okay. It came out okay for us, but we have all heard countless stories where the endings haven't been as fortunate as it was for me. And I realized at the time the power of advocacy and what I needed to do. Immediately, Rebecca, I was thinking really more about increasing the lighting and making sure that there was more police presence, having police, driving through on bikes and just to secure areas and making sure things were okay and safe. Shortly after, I realized the importance of advocating for gun violence prevention and what that meant. So right after that incident, I had the opportunity to do some, on-camera interviews and talking to the public, in a silhouette, however, making sure that we could increase the lighting and making sure that these carjackings didn't happen and couldn't happen again. Shortly after that, I decided I needed to really get involved with the gun violence prevention movement. And I ended up co-chairing the Million Mile March, which you probably, I don't know if you remember, Rebecca, but at the time that was the largest gun violence prevention movement. And I felt like for Virginia, we needed to do this. We needed to elevate this issue. Had the opportunity to do so. And it wasn't shortly thereafter that my sister, who also survived, was the victim of a workplace mass shooting. She survived by hiding under her desk while 6 or 7 of her colleagues were gunned down and killed by an individual at the workplace with an assault weapon. And again, she survived, and I realized this is an epidemic. We need to do something about it. And it was shortly thereafter that I was recruited to run for the House of Delegates, and ran, as you mentioned, in a special election, focusing on many different issues. But this was definitely, as you said, pivotal in my mind as to what I can do, how I can affect change, how I can really make a difference. So it's all about, yes, service, but also really thinking, being very pragmatic about what can we do to change things, to prevent this from happening to others. And, obviously, as the first woman Speaker of the House, the 56th Speaker of the House, I had an opportunity to really make a difference across the board on numerous issues. But when I think about what got me started, I really think of the power of advocacy, and also the opportunity that we had and have to build coalitions, to work with stakeholders, to bring people together across party lines to focus on these issues so that we can really improve the lives of Virginians. And, as you mentioned, I wasn't my life dream or goal to run for office, but I saw a need. I knew I could step in and make a difference. And I'm running for Congress now because I believe more than ever, we need women on the front lines defending our rights and our freedom. Whether I was serving, as delegate, or before, as a mom, always as delegate, as speaker, as Speaker of the House, my mission has always been to protect our families. And it started back from that story. As the first woman Speaker of the House, I took on, the Republicans leading the charge to roll back extreme right-wing abortion restrictions and to protect our democracy. And, those are just some of the issues, but some of the issues that are so important that we hear about every single day. We did better by workers, while at the same time making Virginia the best state in the country for business. And I feel like now I have the opportunity to take that fight to Congress and move forward. What does that mean? Move forward by codifying Roe, protecting our democracy, doing better for small businesses, and so much more. But I do believe that we need a leader now who has the courage and the know-how to just hit the ground running on day one. And I believe I'm that candidate to do it. And I'm not alone in that belief. I've got the support and the endorsement of former Governor Ralph Northam, former Attorney General Mark Herring, Congressman Jamie Raskin, Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, and so many others. And I know that they've endorsed me because I've got the record, because I've been doing the work, because I know how to get things done. I've been effective. And they also know that I'm going to continue this fight. They see how I've had that fight throughout my entire life, what I've been able to accomplish with transformational change in Virginia, and how important it is right now to have people who can do that in Congress. And that includes securing abortion access, expanding voting rights, defending our democracy.
So you mentioned about for small business owners, and that under your leadership as Speaker, that Virginia became one of the best business-friendly states in the country. Obviously, that has changed some under Governor Youngkin. What would this is a group that is mostly business owners, people in the business community. What would be some of your priorities that would be things that would be helping business owners?
Yeah, I think back, and it's hard for me to not talk about what we got done, but also be forward thinking in what we have to do moving forward. And I think about where we are with the economy, and as I spend a lot of time talking with voters, with residents, and seeing the needs and the priorities specifically in the 10th district. But I think often of small business owners. And of course, you're the perfect example, but you can talk about your business and how you grew your business from one person to this tremendous, law firm and all of that. But I firmly believe that rising tide lifts all boats, and small businesses are the backbone of our economy. And certainly that's no exception in VA 10. And right now they're struggling, and you can probably share more about that. But creating a strong overall economy with good schools and good transportation fosters an environment for small businesses to be open and successful and thrive and grow. And when I think of CD10, it is growing so much, as you well know. And there is a need for many small businesses to be an important part of the economy. So whether whether at the local, state, or federal level, there needs to be options, options that will help support small businesses to obtain the financing, the incentives that they can benefit. And in Congress, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I was pleased, you might have seen, Rebecca, I saw just this morning that the Biden administration announced new actions that would expand access to capital for small and medium-sized climate businesses. And it's an important step for businesses and for our environment. So I was really pleased to see that. We'll read more later. But in addition to providing capital through SBA, Department of Energy, Department of Agriculture, these new business programs will support small businesses in adopting clean energy. And I think that's fabulous. But it's also important to understand that these are funded through the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as the bipartisan infrastructure law. And we know that this funding is largely one-time allocations. So in Congress, what we need to do is we need to work to find new funding systems that can permanently support businesses and our environment. So that's just something, it was very ironic when I saw that, this morning. But I also believe that the federal government should support private sector growth and innovation. And while I've always supported policies like paid family and medical leave, I also understand that for small businesses, these policies can be burdensome, really burdensome. And that's why I believe strongly that the federal government needs to take steps to make paid leave more affordable for small businesses. And I don't think it's rocket science, but we should be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, but it requires common sense solutions to the problems that we all acknowledge and the problems that we know that we face and small business owners face.
Well, and I'll put in my own plug for people who are on today. I'm actually hiring for 5 positions in my firm. So if anybody knows anyone, lawyers, paralegals, legal assistants looking to make a change, let me know because we're hiring.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I do, I think, I think we also need to give targeted tax relief to our small community businesses. And, I'll work to ensure that, there are reasonable and necessary regulations faced by small businesses, that they're implemented in an efficient and business-friendly manner. But we also need to be partnering with our local business communities to identify and then work to eliminate those regulations that are specifically overly burdensome or no longer serve the purpose that they were once implemented to serve.
So shifting topics a little bit, Democratic primaries are always really tough. And I've seen that there has been at least one attack ad that's come on a TV against you. And I just would like to give you the opportunity to what you would say about that attack ad and anything you would like us to know, since people, primaries are difficult and attack ads are never easy.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate the opportunity to address it. And it's definitely disappointing, but unsurprising that I face these attacks. They're baseless attacks. It's from a dark money group. But it's shocking and disturbing that I'm the only candidate that are facing these attack ads. But it's clear, I believe, that my message is resonating. We need women on the front lines defending our rights and our freedom. I think that resonates with voters, and I'm sure that's why they're moving forward and attacking me. When I think about my record of accomplishment, and that's what I always focus, Rebecca. I'm very positive. I've got a record of accomplishment. I've got a record for moving, transformational change and working, very pragmatically and being effective and efficient. So I'm assuming that's why they feel, threatened. But when I think about what I did as speaker and the progress that we made, whether we're talking about rolling back right-wing abortion restrictions, whether we're talking about how I was able to hold election deniers accountable, whether we talk about what we did with regard specifically to transportation, all across the board, I think my record must worry them, and that's why they're moving forward. I'm going to continue to be positive about all that we've got done, but also my vision for moving forward and why it's important that we have somebody with the credentials, with the gravitas, with the experience, who's pragmatic and effective to step in the big shoes that Congresswoman Wexton is leaving behind. And I'm the only candidate in this race who's had the opportunity to deliver for all of CD10 in my capacity, in my various roles, but especially as speaker. So I believe strongly that these attack ads, they're false. They're sexist. They also rely on anti-Semitic tropes. I'm going to continue to run a positive race that highlights my experience and my track record of delivering for the Commonwealth and for delivering for all of CD10. And, I would hope that any of the other, opponents would speak out against the attack and promise to run a positive campaign, because I believe strongly that Democrats should not be attacking each other.
You touched on an issue a little while ago that I want to kind of deep dig into a little bit more, about issues relating to for women in particular. When you were elected, I think this is right. You were the only woman serving in the House who had school-age children, which is kind of a mind-boggling concept. As a mom of also school-age children, and now you have your daughter is an adult, and as a mom of an adult daughter, thinking about her rights and her choices is very serious. And I saw an ad that you had done recently talking about exactly that. This issue is something that has changed so dramatically since Dobbs. How do you see your role if you were elected to Congress? How would you handle and address this issue specifically about reproductive rights and choice?
Yes, good question. I hear from residents of CD10 every single day, and you won't be surprised that the most common theme is access to reproductive health care. People are scared, they're worried, they're concerned, but I'll tell you, they're going to act and they're going to vote accordingly. This has been an important issue for me, obviously my entire life, and certainly for years, 14 years in the legislature, both as a delegate, minority leader, and then Speaker of the House. And I've always been a leader on reproductive health care. I'm the only candidate in this race who has fought Republican efforts in the House back in 2012, I think it was, to shame women and harm access to abortion and contraception. So whether it's standing up on the floor of the House, giving speeches, or highlighting these issues, it's important. And I remember on the House floor, I argued against the Republican transvaginal ultrasound bill and shined a light on HB1, which was the personhood bill that we remember, and what that effect would have had on contraception. So we see where we are today, but let's go back and look at what I was able to do, how I was able to highlight these issues, and when I was speaking out. My strategy back in really, I guess, forced the GOP for a number of years to vote against protecting contraception. So as I was able to speak out and shine a light on these bills, whether it's in the floor of committees or on the floor of the House, the strategy was to make sure that they did just that. And you know what they had to do? They ended up killing their own personhood bill as a result of what I was able to do and say on the floor and in committee. And then in 2017, I think it was, I introduced and successfully passed a bill. It was a pivotal piece of legislation. It was the first positive reproductive health care legislation passed in a decade, requiring all the health benefit plans to provide coverage for hormonal contraception up to 12 months at a time. And, that was pretty unheard of as well back in the day in the minority. And then, of course, as Speaker, I led the House to finally roll back all the many right-wing draconian abortion restrictions. So moving forward, though, on day one, I would sign on as a co-sponsor of the Reproductive Freedom for All. Definitely need to codify Roe and ensure all people have, access to abortion, IVF, and all related reproductive health care. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention just the connections here. But one of the things I'm most proud of, my accomplishments in Virginia as Speaker of the House, was securing ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment, making Virginia the 38th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. And we did it for the women of Virginia and America, but we became the 38th state. That was huge. It was huge then, and it's huge now. And people still talk about it.
Well, I have a couple more questions that I want to ask, but I want to open it up to people who are attendees to see if they have questions. We'll do questions for another couple of minutes, and then I have a question that I'll end with. All right, so I'm looking at the questions that I see in the chat. Um, One question is about your competitors are flooding the 11 p.m. news with TV ads. And the question is, when will your TV ads begin, or what channel are they on? So if somebody wanted to see your ads, that they could.
Definitely. So we have been on up and on cable, and I think for several weeks now. And I can definitely, I know it's on MSNBC. There's a whole host of other stations, but it's been up. I believe we might have been the first up, actually. And so hopefully you will see them. I'm hearing from lots of people everywhere I go that they see the ad all the time. It's streaming, but probably most commonly people see it on MSNBC.
All for those who would like to ask questions, I think, Chandris, correct me if I'm wrong, you would need to add or type your questions into the Q&A. I don't know if people can take themselves off of mute. Chandris, tell me if there's another way to do this.
No, that's correct. So just type your questions in the Q&A, and then Rebecca should be able to see them and ask them to Eileen.
All right. One question I did want to ask you about is, obviously being in Congress, you would have opportunities to work on issues relating to international affairs. That obviously is very different than when you were in Virginia. Can you talk a little about kind of your prior experience and why that's something that's interesting to you working on international affairs?
Sure. It's definitely something that we obviously did not have a lot of opportunity to deal with at the state level. And now when I think about what's important, I think about our role in globally and what's important for the United States. How we can support our allies, I think, is just absolutely key. And whether we're talking about our role in protecting our democracy, not just at home, but internationally, I think it's very, very important that we stand together with our allies, and especially now in the precarious situation that we're in. We have an opportunity to stand up, to support, whether it's aid to Taiwan, to Ukraine, to Israel. This is an opportunity that we need to support our allies and the democracies around our country, around the world. We talk about often the threat on democracy and what that means to us now, whether it's voting rights or reproductive health care. That's all tied together. But we also need to, stand up and support our allies, but we need to do the same thing at home. And that's why I think when people talk to me about the threat on, our democracy, they're sometimes talking internationally, but many times they're talking about the right to vote. And I've had the opportunity, when you think about what we were able to do in Virginia, when people talk to me about the threat on our democracy and voting rights, we were 49th in the country level difficulty voting prior to our accomplishments. And during my speakership, we jumped up to 12th. So when we talk about our role in, globally, we need to see what are we doing here at home. And now, of course, with certain individuals, the threat to our democracy and our future and our standing in the world is at stake. I also had the experience and the opportunity to serve in the federal offices of then governors Mark Warner and Tim Kaine. So when both of they were governors, I served in their federal office. And so we had an opportunity to focus on these issues and a lot of the issues that we'll be dealing with in Congress as well.
There's a question in the Q&A from Paul Friedman. What will you do to stand up for the free press at home and abroad?
Yes, I think that's it's been a growing issue and challenge. And I think about how important it is that we focus on facts and what we're seeing right now. And I think I've definitely been the victim, and I think many of us have. But we see things are reported that without any basis for truth or facts. I often say, don't let the facts get in the way. And I think it's important that we, yes, as you're saying, stand up for our press, but ensure that we have the ability to fact check what's going out there. And I think that's been a growing problem. There's so much problem with disinformation, and it's so important to have a free press and ensure that they have the ability to report what's actually happening, and not just creating, as we know, false narratives, or not even considering facts, which is a growing problem with the advent, obviously, of the internet. And so there's good and bad that comes with it, but it's a real problem now, and I think it's growing. And again, not just here in the United States, but also globally, across the world.
There's a question in the chat by some guy named Brad Cheney, who's my husband, for those of you who don't know, also a business owner. The question is, obviously, much of the focus of the race is on the primary, but while this is a Democratic leaning district, it will be competitive this fall. Can you talk about why you are suited to be successful in the general election this fall?
Absolutely. I appreciate that question. And yeah, the focus has been exclusively, obviously, on the primary. I feel that, as the 56th Speaker of the House, during my tenure, we made historic, progress. I had the opportunity to transform Virginians' lives for the better. And, I think about what we were able to do, the legislative achievements, how we were able to protect our democracy, focusing on expanding voting rights, supporting women, rolling back, standing up against those that were rolling back our restrictions for reproductive freedom. I think about the transformational investments we made in Virginia's transportation, protecting our environment, and so much more. And I know the role of the Speaker is unique. So, while we had opportunities to introduce legislation, I spent a lot of the time dealing with the caucus, working with the Senate and the governor to make sure that we could be effective, and thinking about what our outcomes were going to be. So when I think about this election, I often say, don't just listen to what we're saying now. Look at our record. Look at how we governed. Look at how I led. Look at the coalitions I was able to build. It was never easy. Even when we had the trifecta, I mean, there were lawsuits thrown at me. There were literally, Rebecca, there are people in federal prison for trying to assassinate me. But I never let that stop me. I never let that hold me back. I continued to pursue, to stand up for the issues and values that were important to us, and make really tough calls. And I just feel like it's important to look at how we were able to deliver and the type of person we're going to be in Congress. So not just the list of bills, but I also think of my level of record of effectiveness. And I always like to say that I'm very pragmatic, and it's, and I'm confident that's why I received the endorsements that I have today. Don't ever let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Don't let these debates or false information sidetrack progress. And I'm always working to deliver across party lines, which I think is important as well. And even dating back, when I think back to my time in the minority, I have a record of being effective. I have a record of working across the aisle, whether we're talking about Medicaid expansion or passing legislation, as I mentioned earlier, requiring insurance coverage for contraception. And I'm going to bring that pragmatic, progressive approach to Congress. And I believe I'm that uniquely positioned to be an effective advocate for the people of CD10 on day one. And I think, having served in both those governor's offices as well, Mark Warner and Tim Kaine, I think that shows as well. I have done the work. I have focused on these issues. I'm the only candidate also in this race who has experience advocating for Virginians in Congress. And I think that my federal experience has earned me relationships on the Hill that I can put to work on day one. And again, that's as evidenced by some of the endorsements that I've received.
So I'll start to wrap up. I have a last question I'm going to wrap into. There's two other questions in the chat, but I think they all kind of go similarly. So the questions in the chat about, how will you be on the ticket help to defeat Trump? But then also how you're able to work in kind of in a bipartisan way. And then kind of looping that in with my question about primaries are hard. what is the big takeaway message that you would like people to know if they were saying, this is why I am voting for this candidate? What would be the takeaway message of you would say why somebody should support you in this primary? And then we'll wrap up after that.
Okay, all right.
I know it's like
That's a
three questions in one. How would you help defeat Trump? Bipartisan and takeaway.
Yeah, so I believe strongly that we need women who are willing to stand up and make the stand. But especially when you think about Donald Trump, you think you need somebody who's not afraid, who's courageous, who's ready to hit the ground running on day one. I am proven, I am tested, I am effective. Look, I mean, it's hard to become Speaker of the House, and look at how I governed and look at what we got done. Number one, experience and results. And so when I think about what I want people to take away, I want them to vote for the person who has proven themselves, been effective and efficient, and is able to hit the ground running on day one. And I'm confident that's me. And I know I'm not alone in that belief. I mentioned former Governor Ralph Northam endorsed me, former Attorney General Mark Herring, Congressman Jamie Raskin, Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, Congresswoman Kathy Manning. The list goes on. And I think they know that I will be effective on day one for the residents of CD10. And nobody else has delivered for the entire CD10 as I have in my capacity as Speaker. And, and I think my record speaks for itself. So that's what I'm trying to highlight. And yes, primaries are tough. I am always a team player, always working with everybody. You need look no further than all of the help that I have provided to Democrats up and down the ballot for years and years and years. I am always the one that's helping other Democrats succeed. And I have always done that, whether it's raising money, giving money, providing advice, mentorship, for years and years. So I think that's important. And, so when you think of a primary, it's more challenging, but I will always continue to do that. That's who I am. That's what I'm made of. And I have helped many candidates, even in the race, who are running against me today, and they would admit to that.
Well, Eileen, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And everybody should make sure they know you can vote early. Early voting has begun. And the primary is in 2 weeks from Tuesday. Is that right?
Yes.
2 weeks from Tuesday. So a little under
The
3 weeks
18th.
away. Yes. All right.